The Journey of Amelia and the English Language. Amelia was a bright young woman from a small town in Brazil. She had dreams of studying abroad, perhaps in the United States or the UK. But there was one big obstacle in her way: English. Her native language was Portuguese, and though she had studied some basic English in school, she never felt comfortable speaking it. The words felt foreign on her tongue, and the grammar rules made little sense. At first, Amelia tried to learn on her own, using free apps and watching English movies with subtitles. But it felt like no matter how much she tried, she was stuck in the same place. The vocabulary slipped from her memory as soon as she learned it, and when she attempted to speak, the words got tangled up in her throat. Every conversation seemed like a mountain to climb, and she often felt embarrassed when she couldn't find the right words. Her first breakthrough came when she joined a language exchange group in her town. There, she met people from different countries who were also learning English. They would meet once a week in a local cafe, where they would practice speaking. It wasn't easy at first. She was nervous about making mistakes, but the others were patient, and she realized she wasn't alone in her struggle. One day, Amelia met a woman named Sarah, a fluent English speaker who was learning Portuguese. They started meeting outside the group for one-on-one practice. Sarah encouraged Amelia to speak without fear of mistakes and corrected her gently when needed. Slowly but surely, Amelia's confidence grew. They spoke about everyday things: shopping, travel, family. Each conversation, however simple, felt like a victory. But there were still hard days. Some days, Amelia felt like she wasn't making any progress. She'd mispronounce words or forget what she'd learned the day before. She'd watch movies in English and realize she understood barely half of what was being said. It was frustrating. Then came the turning point. Amelia decided to immerse herself completely. She changed her phone's language settings to English, started reading English books, at first, children's books, and began keeping a journal in English. She even watched her favorite TV shows without subtitles, even if it meant not catching everything. Little by little, the language started to click. The words that once felt impossible now started to make sense. One evening, months after she started, Amelia had a Skype interview for a scholarship abroad. She was nervous, her palms sweaty, but as soon as the interview began, something changed. The words flowed. She wasn't perfect. There were stumbles, pauses, but she could express herself. The interviewer smiled and said, "Your English is really good." Amelia didn't know how to respond at first, because it was the first time anyone had said that to her. But in that moment, she realized how far she had come. All the struggles, all the frustrations had led to this point. She had crossed a barrier she once thought was too high. Amelia didn't get the scholarship, but she wasn't discouraged. Learning English had taught her something far more valuable: the power of persistence and belief in herself. She knew she would get there eventually, not because it was easy, but because she wouldn't give up. Learning a language can be tough, full of setbacks, but as Amelia discovered, it's also a journey of growth. Each small victory adds up, and with time, what once seemed impossible becomes achievable. Amelia's English Odyssey. After the interview, Amelia was proud of her progress but also reflective. She realized that while she could carry on a basic conversation, she still struggled with advanced topics. Her dream of studying abroad meant more than just talking about everyday life. It required understanding academic texts, writing essays, and engaging in discussions. This was a new mountain to climb. She decided to enroll in an intensive English course at a local language school. Her teacher, Mr. Clark, was a kind yet strict British man who believed in pushing his students beyond their comfort zones. On the first day, he gave them a daunting task. Each student was to write a 500-word essay in English on a complex topic: global warming. Amelia's heart sank. She barely knew how to structure a sentence properly, let alone write an essay. The next few days were a blur of confusion and frustration. She spent hours at her desk, staring at a blank page. Every time she tried to write, the words came out wrong. The grammar rules she had learned felt like a tangled web, trapping her thoughts. She cried out of frustration more than once, wondering if she was even cut out for this. But Mr. Clark had a way of encouraging his students without sugarcoating their struggles. He gave Amelia feedback on her first draft, There were red marks all over the paper. It was disheartening to see so many corrections. But in each comment, she found direction. He pointed out the areas she could improve, from sentence structure to the use of transitional phrases. He didn't expect perfection. He just wanted her to keep improving. Amelia took his advice to heart and rewrote the essay 3 times. Each version was a little better than the last. With every revision, she learned more about how English worked, not just as a language but as a tool for expressing ideas. She realized that English wasn't about translating her thoughts from Portuguese. It was about thinking in a new way. Her classmates, too, were a source of inspiration. Some were from Japan, others from France, China, and even Nigeria. They all had their own struggles with the language. During group discussions, they would stumble, laugh, and help each other. Amelia realized that everyone had their own pace, their own hurdles. Some students were better at speaking, others excelled at writing. It wasn't a competition but a shared journey. One evening after class, Amelia found herself having a deep conversation with a classmate from Germany. They talked about their countries, their dreams, and their shared frustrations with learning English. At one point, Amelia paused and realized something amazing. She hadn't been translating in her head. She had been speaking English naturally, without overthinking every word. It wasn't perfect, but it was real communication. She felt free, like a dam had broken. But the road was still long. After completing her English course, Amelia took the ielts exam, a requirement for university admission abroad. She studied for months, tackling reading comprehension, listening exercises, and writing practice tests. The hardest part for her was the speaking test. She still got nervous when faced with native speakers, fearing she would say something wrong or be misunderstood. On the day of the exam, her heart raced. The examiner asked her to talk about a challenging experience in her life. Without hesitation, Amelia smiled and told the story of her journey learning English. She spoke about her initial struggles, her frustrations, and her determination to improve. As she talked, she realized something. Her story wasn't just about learning a language. It was about overcoming self-doubt and embracing growth. When her IELTS results came in, Amelia was overjoyed. She had scored higher than she ever imagined. It wasn't a perfect score, but it was more than enough for university applications. For the first time, her dream of studying abroad felt within reach. Months later, Amelia received an acceptance letter from a university in the UK. She held the letter in her hands, tears welling in her eyes. The road had been tough, filled with setbacks and moments of doubt. But here she was, about to embark on the next chapter of her life. As she packed her bags for the UK, Amelia reflected on how far she had come. Learning English had changed her in ways she never expected. It had not only opened doors to new opportunities, but had also given her the confidence to face any challenge life threw at her. She knew there would be new struggles ahead, navigating life in a foreign country, studying in a second language, making new friends, but she was ready. The girl who once felt embarrassed to speak English had grown into someone who could express herself with confidence and clarity. Amelia smiled as she boarded the plane. Her journey with English wasn't over, it was just beginning. Amelia's new world, life in the UK. Arriving in the UK felt like stepping into another world. Everything was different, the weather, the architecture, the people. The accents were thicker than she expected, and even though she had practiced for months, British English felt like a new language altogether. At first, she struggled to understand the casual conversations around her. Her ears had been tuned to the crisp, slow enunciation of language lessons and movies. But in real life, people spoke quickly, with slang and idiomatic phrases that left her confused. Her first few weeks at university were a blur. The lectures moved fast, and Amelia often found herself lost. Even when she understood the content, she struggled to take notes quickly enough. Professors used terms and expressions that weren't in any of her textbooks. Group discussions were nerve-wracking, as Amelia felt hesitant to speak up. What if she said something wrong? What if they didn't understand her? Her confidence wavered, and there were moments when she considered returning home. She missed the comfort of her native language, the ease of conversation, and the warmth of familiarity. But deep down, Amelia knew she had come too far to give up now. This was just another challenge, and she had already overcome so many. One evening, after a particularly tough day of classes, Amelia called her friend Sarah back home in Brazil. They talked about everything: Sarah's own struggles with Portuguese, Amelia's frustrations in the UK. Sarah's words were simple but powerful. "You're stronger than you think, Amelia. Remember how far you've come. You just need to find your rhythm again." Sarah's encouragement reignited something in Amelia. She decided to stop focusing on perfection and start focusing on progress, no matter how small. She reminded herself that she was in the UK not just to learn English, but to live it, to experience it in all its messy, unpredictable glory. The next day, Amelia changed her approach. Instead of retreating into silence during group discussions, she began speaking up, even if her sentences weren't flawless. At first, her contributions were small, but gradually she grew bolder. She learned that her classmates weren't judging her for making mistakes. In fact, they appreciated her perspectives. Many of them were international students as well, and they understood the difficulties of expressing complex thoughts in a second language. Amelia also started attending extracurricular activities on campus. She joined the university's debate club, not because she was a great debater, but because she knew it would force her to think and speak quickly in English. It was terrifying at first. The fast pace, the rapid-fire exchanges, it was like running a marathon after barely learning how to walk. But with each debate, Amelia grew faster, sharper. She learned how to structure her arguments clearly and concisely, and most importantly, she learned how to listen. Understanding her opponent's points, even when spoken quickly, became a skill she honed over time. Outside of class, Amelia made friends with a group of local students who introduced her to British culture. They took her to pubs, football matches, and weekend trips to the countryside. She picked up bits of local slang, like cheers instead of thank you and knackered when she was tired. Immersing herself in the everyday life of her new home made English feel less like a barrier and more like a bridge. But there were still tough moments. Writing academic papers was one of the hardest challenges she faced. English essays required not just good language skills but the ability to argue and analyze complex ideas. Amelia often found herself staring at the screen, unsure how to begin. She would write and rewrite sentences, trying to capture the nuance of her thoughts in a language that still felt unfamiliar at times. She sought help from the university's writing center, where tutors guided her through the process. They taught her how to organize her thoughts, use academic vocabulary, and cite sources properly. With each paper, she improved. She began to understand that writing wasn't about translating her thoughts from Portuguese to English. It was about thinking in English from the start. One day, towards the end of her first semester, Amelia received an unexpected email from her professor. He praised her latest essay, noting how much she had improved since the beginning of the term. "Your argument was insightful and well articulated," he wrote. "Keep up the good work." Amelia couldn't believe it. She read the email over and over, hardly able to believe that she had written something worthy of praise in a language that had once felt impossible to grasp. That moment was a turning point. Amelia realized that she wasn't just surviving in the UK. She was thriving. Her struggles had made her stronger, more resilient. She had learned to embrace imperfection, to see mistakes as part of the learning process. English was no longer just a subject she studied. It was a tool she used to navigate her new life, to connect with others, to express herself in ways she never thought possible. By the end of her first year, Amelia had not only adapted to life in the UK but had become a part of it. She had friends from all over the world. She could debate confidently in English, and her academic writing had improved beyond what she thought was possible. She no longer felt like an outsider looking in. She was living her dream, not just as a student abroad, but as a fully engaged, confident participant in a new world. Epilogue. Years later, Amelia would look back on her time in the UK with pride. Her English journey had been full of ups and downs, but every struggle had made her stronger. By the time she graduated, she was fluent not just in the language, but in the culture, the nuances, and the confidence it had given her. Amelia went on to build a successful career, working for an international company that required her to communicate in English daily. She traveled the world, met new people, and never felt limited by language again. The struggles that had once seemed insurmountable were now the foundation of her greatest achievements. In the end, Amelia's story wasn't just about learning English. It was about discovering her own resilience, her ability to adapt, and her capacity to grow in the face of challenge. Amelia's global journey, from learner to leader. As Amelia settled into her life in the UK, her confidence in English continued to grow. By her second year at university, she was thriving academically. Her professors noted how her essays demonstrated clarity and depth, and her classmates often looked to her for input during group projects. It was a transformation she hadn't expected, and yet, she still felt like there was so much more to learn. One day, Amelia attended a guest lecture by an international businesswoman named Emily Johnson. Emily spoke about the importance of cross-cultural communication in the business world. She shared stories of negotiating deals in different countries, where language was only one of the many barriers to success. What struck Amelia the most was when Emily said, "Speaking a second language is like having a superpower. It allows you to connect with people on a deeper level, beyond the surface of words." Those words resonated with Amelia. She realized that her struggle to learn English had given her something invaluable, a unique perspective on communication. She understood the nuances of language in a way that native speakers sometimes overlooked. She knew how it felt to be misunderstood, and she had developed the patience and empathy to help others express themselves, regardless of their language skills. Inspired, Amelia decided to pursue a career in international relations. She wanted to use her English skills not just for herself, but to help bridge cultures and foster understanding between people from different parts of the world. After graduating with honors, she applied for an internship with a global nonprofit organization focused on education and development in underprivileged communities. The application process was intense, and the interview was conducted entirely in English. But this time, Amelia wasn't nervous. She spoke confidently about her experiences, her struggles with language, and how they had shaped her into someone who understood the importance of communication. The interviewers were impressed not only by her qualifications but by the depth of her personal journey. A few weeks later, she received the news. She had been accepted. The new frontier, navigating the professional world. Amelia's internship took her to various countries in Asia and Africa, where English was often the second or even third language spoken. She quickly realized that while she was fluent in English, the real challenge lay in adapting her communication style to suit the different cultures she encountered. The way people expressed themselves varied greatly from country to country, and Amelia found herself once again in the role of a learner. In Kenya, she worked with local educators to develop English language programs for rural schools. The children were eager to learn, and Amelia found herself drawing on her own experiences as a struggling language learner to connect with them. She used simple stories, games, and songs to teach English, and as she watched the children's eyes light up with understanding, she was reminded of her own breakthroughs. In India, she worked with a team to organize conferences where international speakers and local leaders discussed educational reform. At first, Amelia struggled to understand the thick accents and fast-paced conversations, but she learned to listen carefully, asking for clarification when needed, and soon she was not only participating in the discussions but leading them. Her ability to navigate different cultural contexts, combined with her empathy for non-native English speakers, made her a valuable asset to the team. Amelia's internship eventually turned into a full-time job. She was promoted to a leadership position, where she coordinated projects across multiple countries. Her team consisted of people from diverse linguistic backgrounds, and she often found herself acting as a bridge between them, ensuring that everyone understood each other despite the language barriers. Her work was challenging, but it was also deeply rewarding. She saw firsthand how language could either unite or divide people. In one project, she helped facilitate a collaboration between a school in Ghana and a partner organization in the UK. The project had stalled due to miscommunications. Each side felt that the other wasn't listening. Amelia stepped in, holding meetings where she translated not just words, but the intentions and cultural nuances behind them. Slowly, trust was rebuilt, and the project moved forward successfully. One of her proudest moments came during a summit in South Africa, where Amelia was asked to give a keynote speech on the importance of language and education in fostering global cooperation. As she stood before an audience of international delegates, Amelia reflected on how far she had come, from the girl who had once been too afraid to speak English in public to a confident leader standing at the forefront of global change. Her speech was heartfelt and personal. She spoke about the struggles she had faced learning English, the setbacks, and the moments of doubt. But she also spoke about the power of persistence and how learning a language had opened doors she never imagined possible. Language is more than just words, she said. It's a way to connect, to understand, to build bridges where there were once walls, coming full circle, teaching others to overcome. Years later, Amelia returned to Brazil to give back to the community that had supported her journey. She started a nonprofit organization focused on helping young people from disadvantaged backgrounds learn English. Her goal was not just to teach them grammar and vocabulary, but to empower them with the confidence to use the language to pursue their own dreams. Amelia's approach was different from traditional methods. She emphasized the importance of making mistakes, of speaking without fear. She created a safe space where her students could practice English without the pressure of perfection. She used the same techniques that had helped her: language exchange programs, storytelling, and immersive experiences. One student in particular, a shy teenager named Lucas, reminded Amelia of herself. Lucas struggled with English, often shutting down during conversations because he was afraid of making mistakes. Amelia worked with him one-on-one, encouraging him to speak even if he got the words wrong. She shared her own story, showing him that everyone starts somewhere, and that the key was to keep pushing forward. Over time, Lucas's confidence grew. He started participating more in class, and by the end of the year, he was one of the top students. When he stood up to give a presentation entirely in English at the end of the course, Amelia couldn't help but smile. She saw in him the same spark that had driven her forward all those years ago, the legacy of a language learner. Amelia's journey with English had started as a struggle, but it had transformed into a lifelong passion. The language that once intimidated her became a tool that allowed her to travel the world, connect with people from different cultures, and make a tangible difference in the lives of others. Her story was a testament to the power of persistence. Learning English wasn't just about mastering a language. It was about discovering her own strength, finding her voice, and using it to inspire others. And though she had become fluent in English, Amelia knew that the most important lesson she had learned was that true fluency comes not just from speaking a language, but from understanding the hearts and minds of the people who speak it. Amelia's struggles had shaped her into the person she was: a leader, a teacher, and a global citizen. And for every new challenge she faced, whether it was in English or another language, she knew one thing for certain: she had the power to overcome it. Amelia's story illustrates that learning a language can be transformative in every sense, not just in terms of communication, but in shaping one's identity, worldview, and path in life. The struggles she faced early on became the foundation for her greatest successes. Amelia's evolution, leadership, legacy, and lifelong learning. As Amelia's nonprofit organization grew, she became a well-respected figure in both the local and international education sectors. Her ability to navigate multiple languages and cultures made her an advocate for language learning as a way to empower communities. She believed that language could unlock opportunities, build bridges across borders, and create understanding between people who might otherwise be separated by differences. But Amelia's vision went beyond just teaching English. She began developing programs that emphasized cultural exchange and global citizenship. Her organization hosted annual international language festivals, where young people from Brazil could interact with students from around the world. These events weren't just about practicing English. They were about creating connections that went deeper than language. Amelia would often speak at these festivals, sharing her personal journey. She would tell the young people in the audience that their struggles with language didn't define them, that each mistake they made was a step forward, not a setback. "You are more than your accent, more than the words you use," she would say. "You are the ideas, the dreams, and the passion that shine through your voice. no matter what language you speak. Her words resonated with the students, many of whom came from disadvantaged backgrounds and had been told that they were not good enough. Amelia had faced similar doubts, and she knew firsthand how powerful it was to have someone believe in you. She made it her mission to be that person for others. A personal journey, finding love across cultures. As Amelia's professional life flourished, so did her personal life. During one of her international trips, she met Alex, a journalist from Canada who was also passionate about global education. They connected instantly over their shared love of travel, languages, and their desire to make a difference in the world. Alex had been living in various countries for years, reporting on issues related to education, poverty, and human rights. Though they came from different countries and spoke different native languages, Amelia in Portuguese and Alex in English, they found that their shared values and goals transcended those barriers. Their relationship was a beautiful blend of cultures, and they often joked about their third language, a mix of English, Portuguese, and whatever bits of other languages they had picked up along the way. But being in an intercultural relationship wasn't without its challenges. Sometimes misunderstandings arose, not because of language itself, but because of cultural differences. There were moments when Amelia felt lost trying to explain a Brazilian concept that didn't quite translate into English, or when Alex struggled to grasp the nuances of Brazilian social customs. But they both approached these moments with patience and a sense of humor, seeing them as opportunities to learn from each other. Their love grew stronger with each experience, and soon, Alex became involved in Amelia's nonprofit, helping to document the stories of students whose lives had been changed by learning English. Together, they traveled to rural schools, met with educators, and interviewed students whose worlds had expanded through language learning. Alex was fascinated by Amelia's journey, the way she had turned her personal struggle into a global mission. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the balcony of a small guest house in Peru, he turned to her and said, "Your story is powerful, Amelia. People need to hear it. Why don't you write a book?" At first, the idea seemed overwhelming. Amelia wasn't sure she had the right words to tell her story, despite her years of mastering English. But Alex persisted, reminding her that the very thing she feared, writing, was the same thing that had once seemed impossible when it came to speaking English. "You conquered that," he said. "You can conquer this too." Writing her legacy, the book that changed lives. Inspired by Alex's encouragement, Amelia began to write. At first, the process was slow, and she struggled to find the right tone. Writing in English felt different from speaking it, and she found herself doubting her ability to express her story clearly. But as she wrote, she realized that her vulnerability was part of what made her story relatable. She didn't need to write like a native speaker. She needed to write like herself. The book, Breaking Barriers, My Journey from Silence to Empowerment, was a deeply personal account of her struggles, triumphs, and everything in between. She wrote about her early frustrations, the moments of doubt, and the small victories that had kept her going. She also shared the stories of the students she had met through her nonprofit, stories of transformation, resilience, and hope. When the book was finally published, it quickly gained international attention. Readers from all over the world, students, teachers, language learners, reached out to her, saying how much her story had inspired them. It wasn't just a book about learning English. It was about overcoming self-doubt, embracing challenges, and realizing that personal growth often comes from the hardest struggles. Amelia was invited to speak at international conferences, schools, and universities, where she shared her journey with audiences of all ages. Her message was clear. Learning a language isn't just about words. It's about discovering who you are and who you can become. She encouraged her listeners to embrace the discomfort of learning, to see mistakes as stepping stones, and to believe in their ability to succeed, no matter how hard the road might seem. Her book became a bestseller, translated into multiple languages. It was used in classrooms around the world as a source of inspiration for students struggling with language learning. Amelia never expected to become an author, but her words had touched people in ways she hadn't imagined, building a global community. As the years passed, Amelia's nonprofit expanded beyond Brazil, partnering with organizations in Asia, Africa, and Europe to create a global network of language learning and cultural exchange programs. Amelia believed that by teaching young people to communicate across languages, they could foster a generation of global citizens who were more compassionate, understanding, and open to the world around them. In one of her proudest moments, Amelia was invited to speak at the United Nations on the topic of global education and language learning. Standing before world leaders, she spoke about the power of language to unite, to build peace, and to create opportunities for young people everywhere. She shared stories from her nonprofit, highlighting how learning English had opened doors for children in rural areas, allowing them to connect with the wider world and pursue their dreams. Her speech was met with a standing ovation. Amelia's journey, which had started with the simple desire to learn English, had come full circle. She was now a leader in the global movement for education, a symbol of what could be achieved through persistence, passion, and belief in oneself. The future of Amelia's mission. As Amelia continued her work, she never forgot where she had started. She often returned to her hometown in Brazil, visiting the school where she had first struggled with English. She would sit with the students, sharing stories of her journey, reminding them that they, too, could achieve greatness, no matter how difficult their path seemed at the moment. One day, as she looked out at a classroom full of eager young faces, she realized that her mission had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. She had set out to learn English, but what she had gained was so much more. The ability to inspire others, the strength to push through challenges, and the power to make a difference in the world. Amelia's story became more than just her own. It was the story of every person who had ever doubted themselves, every learner who had struggled, and every dreamer who had dared to believe in a better future. Through her work, she had built a global community of learners, teachers, and changemakers, all united by the belief that language has the power to transform lives. And so, Amelia's journey continued, not as the girl who once struggled to learn English, but as the woman who had learned to change the world. Amelia's ongoing story demonstrates that learning a language can be the catalyst for a much larger transformation, personally, professionally, and globally. Her experience of overcoming her own fears and challenges became the foundation for empowering others and leading with purpose.